little girls again. Now those naughty little girls are gonna put me to shame. I wish that I'd been born with a little more sense. This time it's a serious offense.
In the fall of 1979, a friend of mine named Tom Coleman, who was several years older, happened to be playing the Kinks' Schoolboys in Disgrace album when I visited him one time. It was a revelation for me. I had had the Everybody's in Showbiz 8-track a couple years before, but that is not the album that you want to be introduced to the Kinks to. Hearing Schoolboys in Disgrace was like opening a whole new world. And soon after, I found the album for myself and bought it, and I got Low Budget, which was the current album at the time, and Sleepwalker. That discovery was the most exciting thing that had happened to me since rediscovering the Beatles several years before. And I embarked on an obsession with finding everything I could by the Kinks. This video is just kind of a tribute to their music and what it's meant to me all these years.
Hello, me.
Back in the late 1970s while I was in high school, I was basically a music radio fan. In fact, the only song I really knew of the Kinks was You Really Got Me, which was currently being covered by Van Halen. Then one day Lloyd asked me if I wanted to go and see the Kinks in concert, and I said, sure, that'd be great. In fact, I asked him, could you make me a cassette tape so I can be familiar with some of the songs to help me enjoy the show? Well, he made me this tape, and I must have played it 100 times. Many of the songs I had heard on the radio, I just didn't know it was the Kinks, and the other ones really I thought were great. And it was that concert and this tape that really began my Kinks connection.
June 1980, the One for the Road album, the first new Kinks album to come out since becoming Kinks fans. I remember going to the Victor Gramophone shop in Victorville the day it was released to pick up my copy.
In fact, I distinctly remember you bought it during the day, you didn't listen to it until you called a bunch of us over for an album listening party, which often was done with new albums.
Girl, I want to be with you all of the time. The only time I feel alright is by your side. Girl, I want to be with you all of the time, all day and all the night.
On August 18th, 1980, we bought the tickets for our first Kinks concert, which was on October 10th at the Forum in Inglewood near Los Angeles. While waiting for the concert, I got the videotape of One for the Road for my birthday, which was on September 1st.
Fact is, if I recall correctly, that was the first video that came out in connection with an album.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It was my first Kinks show, so really a lot of great memories there. I was looking at an article that was in the paper, a review of the show afterwards, and it reminded me that they actually came out on stage for the opening act wearing smog masks. Of course, a commentary of a smoggy Los Angeles area. Another memory I have of the show is they played Twist and Shout, which was a song I was familiar with, and it was just fun to hear.
Yeah, that was a big surprise, because when you think of Twist and Shout, you don't think of the Kinks, but it was a very nice surprise. And I also remember an Australian band called Angel City opened for the Kinks, and we really liked them, and I remember getting one of their albums after the show. They were one of the better opening acts we saw anytime with the Kinks.
If you make us annoyed over Christmas, give us some money. Don't mess around with those silly toys. But give my daddy a job, cause he needs one. He's got lots of mouths to feed. But if you've got one, I have a machine gun, so I can scare all the kids on the street.
Give the People What They Want was the first new studio album by the Kinks since we had become fans.
That album just furthered my obsession with the Kinks. I loved it so much, and I still love it. And even though a lot of people, including Ray, dismissed the album as not being one of their best efforts, at the time, Rolling Stone magazine gave it 4 stars in their review.
For anyone else, you gotta live life. That's all you do. Nobody gonna live the life for
As was typical for Ray's perfectionist tendencies, the album actually was released after the start of the Give the People What They Want tour.
That's right. So that means that songs from that album, like Around the Dial and Back to Front and Killer's Eyes, we were hearing for the very first time at the concert.
After we saw the Kinks at the Forum on August 14th, 1981, I had made a note in my little logbook that I have. I was now a Kinks fan. It was really a good show.
And I think at the time we were thinking of them as a contemporary group. I mean, we had a vague idea that they had a history to them, but for us, mainly, they were our favorite current band.
everybody got secrets that they wanna hide. When midnight comes along, I take a look inside. Don't go talking in your sleep. I might come in for a peek. I'm a sleepwalker. I'm a night stalker.
A couple nights after the Forum show, we got to see the Kinks again at the Hollywood Palladium on August 18th. Just you and I went to that show. It was a midweek show. A lot of other friends we had to work and couldn't go.
And there was so much excitement and activity surrounding the Kinks at that time. Just a couple of weeks before that Forum show, they announced tickets for 2 shows at the Hollywood Palladium. And so it was this last-minute addition of a couple shows at a much smaller venue.
When I walked out of that concert, I was numb. It was the perfect show. In fact, as I was trying to think back what made it so perfect, it really was our first intimate experience up close to the Kinks.
They were just playing so well. They were very tight, they were full of energy, and everything was in place for a very energetic set.
No doubt about it, they were tight that night. But we did benefit a little bit, I think, from seeing them a couple nights before at the Forum show because we were able to get familiar with some of the new songs on the new album.
All of the new songs sounded great. But for me, the highlight was Yo-Yo. Now that's the type of song that they've gotten bashed for in recent years for being too arena rock and too pandering. But for me, 19 years old at the time at this great show at the Palladium, that song just stood out as being so full of energy and passion, and that was one of the greatest concert experiences I've ever had. And I gave that concert in my little rating book 4 exclamation marks, which was my highest ever, and to this day it still ranks as the greatest concert I've ever seen.
You were right. It was totally a great show, and it was actually a great time to be a Kinks fan. It was chaotic for the band and for the fans. It was just a total pandemonium, a total state of confusion.
Woke up in a panic, like somebody fired a gun. I wish I could be dreaming, but the nightmare's just begun. There's flooding in the basement, there's water all around. There's woodworm in the attic, and the ceiling just fell down. I'm in a state of confusion. I'm in a state of confusion. All the dirty dishes are still in the kitchen sink. The tumble dryer's broken, now the telly's on the blink. The girlfriend packed her bags and moved out to another town. She couldn't stand the boredom when the video broke down.
I got into the Kinks from an early influence from my brother and his friend Lloyd. They became big Kinks fans, and they took me and my sister to the US Festival. And I saw the Kinks 9 times total because of that early experience. I made 2 teddy bears for Ray Davies during my college years. And the first time we made a little jacket for a teddy bear like how Ray Davies wore, and we didn't get that one back. I knew we threw it on the stage, and he played with it, and we always joked about how one of the stage hands must have ended up with it. And then 2 years later, I did it again. I got a teddy bear. I made a little t-shirt with the Kinks on it, and we also were in the orchestra pit in front row seats, and we threw that up to Ray Davies, and he played with it a lot, and he gave it back to us. And I think that's when I touched Ray Davies' hands, when I handed him the teddy bear when he handed it back, and it was pretty exciting to be able to say I touched Ray Davies.
Well, I remember as a teenager never having gone to a concert in my life, and my brother Rob and his friend Lloyd invited my sister Julie and I to go to this US Festival. And okay, so we went, and not knowing what we were getting into, and here was this gigantic grassy field filled with thousands of people and just chaos. The parking and getting us there and back was just unreal, but it made for a wonderful adventure. And so that was kind of fun, almost as fun as the concert itself.
I was 16 when I went to the US Festival. I remember just guys with their shirts off, and we were waiting and waiting and waiting for the Kinks.
I want to say I remember like Lloyd or like climbing on someone's shoulder, but maybe I didn't do it. Maybe I saw people doing it or something, because I can't imagine doing that.
We would sit on their shoulders so we could get a better view, because it was standing room only, basically outside.
And the crazy thing that I remember is that they had little squirt bottles that had the US Festival logo on it. And as we'd walk around the grassy area, because it was outdoors, and we would just spray people. They're like, thank you, thank you.
And I remember Rob and Lloyd being very good with Susan and I being there and making sure we were okay. And
Glen Helen Regional Park in Southern California is the site of another big Kinks concert, the US Festival, which we saw in 1982.
The US Festival was a 3-day event. Now originally we had no intention of going, but late in the process the Kinks were added to the bill on the second night. So once that happened, we had to get tickets.
Right now we are standing in front of the site of the US Festival. The US Festival was a concert by Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, and it was certainly a great experience, a great opportunity to see the Kinks. What memories do you have of the Kinks at that show?
Well, it was extremely hot that day. I remember that. They had tents set up with misters and sprayers so you could keep cool. There were a bunch of acts that day, so we saw Eddie Money and Santana and the Cars. The grass that you can see behind us was new for the US Festival. It wasn't very well rooted, so it was getting dug up and muddy and messed up.
Yeah, I recall that when the Cars finished and between when the Kinks started, there was a long gap
Yeah, we found out later that they'd been fighting with Bill Graham, the promoter, about when they were going to go on. The Kinks wanted to wait until after dark as kind of a prestige thing. Bill Graham wanted them to come on earlier, but the Kinks won that battle because they just simply didn't show up until much later in the day. So Bill Graham was not happy with them at that point. It gave us a chance to get closer to the stage, so we actually ended up with a pretty good spot.
It was a good concert. In fact, I distinctly remember hearing the first bits of a song called what was that called again?
Well, it ended up being the song Entertainment, but I don't know if we knew what the title was at the time. I don't think Ray announced the title. They just started doing this new song, and it sounded great to us, and it was, you know, this mystery song. What was it, and where did it come from? And it didn't show up until several years later on the UK Jive album, and then it ended up being probably the worst song on the album. So after all that waiting, it was kind of anticlimactic.
I do remember after the show, it took maybe 6 to 8 hours, I think, to get out. We had to take buses, standing in line. What memories do you have?
I almost passed out because we were shuttled like cattle in this waiting area for the shuttle buses to get us to the parking lot where the cars were. And it was hot and close, and I came very close to fainting. Then when we finally did get to the parking lot, we couldn't find the car. We were walking up and down.
I remember showing up for breakfast at my parents', and they were, of course, concerned about myself and my sisters. But certainly a great Kinks experience.
Yeah.
In fact, the US Festival was the third of a trifecta. It was basically the very first concert we'd ever seen of the Kinks. That was at the Forum. The second time we saw the Kinks was also a Forum show, but more importantly, a fantastic experience we've talked about earlier at the Hollywood Palladium, and then here at the US Festival. You know, Lloyd, we were really fortunate to live this close to Los Angeles.
You're right, Rob. Whenever the Kinks hit the road, they were sure to come to LA, so we always got to see their tours. We didn't have to worry about missing them.
In fact, speaking of the road and driving there, I always remember on the way back, we'd always stop at Denny's and reminisce.
That's right, and I think our waitress was always named Dottie.
That's right, that it was.
Yeah, I think we got to see some very special shows that a lot of people in other parts of the country didn't get to see, like the Palladium shows. I mean, shows like that only happen in Hollywood.
Everybody's a dreamer, and everybody's a star, and everybody's in movies. Doesn't matter who you are. There are stars in every city, in every house and on every street. And if you walk down Hollywood Boulevard, their names are written in concrete. Don't step on Greta Garbo as you walk down the boulevard. She looks so weak and fragile, that's why she tried to be so hard. But they turned her into a princess, and they sat her on a throne. But she turned her back on stardom, because she wanted to be alone. Rudolph Valentino looks very much alive, and he looks up ladies' dresses as they sadly pass him by. Avoid stepping on Bela Lugosi, 'cause he's liable to turn and bite. But stand close by Betty Davis, because hers was such a lonely life. If you covered him with garbage, George Sanders would still have style. And if you stamped on Mickey Rooney, he would still turn round and smile. But please don't tread on dearest Marilyn, 'cause she's not very tough. She should have been made of iron or steel, but she was only made of flesh and blood. You can see all the stars as you walk down Hollywood Boulevard. Some that you recognize, some that you've hardly even heard of. People who worked and suffered and struggled for fame. Some who succeeded and some who suffered in vain. Everybody's a dreamer, and everybody's a star, and everybody's in showbiz. It doesn't matter who you are. And those who are successful, be always on your guard. Success walks hand in hand with failure along Hollywood Boulevard. No matter what your occupation is, everybody's in showbiz. 'Cause I'm a star, and I can make you a star. I believe that everybody's a celebrity, and we are the personality, the individuality. We all read lines, we all act a part. We all need a script and an audience to make it. No matter what you do or who you are, everybody's a star. I'm a star maker. Yes, I wanna make you a star. Ooh, yes. 'Cause everybody's a star.
And what was the most interesting about this is none of my friends were Kinks fans. I was in college for most of that time, and I'd go off with my brother to Kinks concerts, and none of my friends of my age were into them, so it was kind of a thing I had different from everybody else.
'Cause I'm not like everybody else.